Jake Mitchell stared at the control panel as warning lights blinked across every surface. The scout ship shuddered violently, metal groaning under stress it was never designed to handle. His hands moved frantically over the controls, trying to pull the nose up, but the moon's gravity had him in its grip. Draken Prime filled his viewport. Dense forests stretched endlessly below, broken only by jagged mountain ranges and deep valleys. Beautiful and deadly. The planet had been flagged red in every survey database. Observe from orbit only. Do not land. Do not engage with local fauna. Jake was about to break all those rules whether he wanted to or not. The left engine exploded in a shower of sparks. The ship spun wildly. Jake's stomach lurched as the world tumbled around him. He caught glimpses of sky, then ground, then sky again. His training kicked in through the panic. He grabbed the manual release for the emergency thrusters. Nothing happened. He pulled again. Still nothing. The ground rushed up to meet him. Jake braced himself against the seat, every muscle tensed. This was going to hurt. The impact threw him forward so hard his vision went white. Metal screamed as the ship tore through trees, bounced off rocks, and finally came to rest in a twisted heap of smoking wreckage. For a long moment, Jake just sat there, ears ringing, trying to remember how to breathe. He was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. Jake fumbled with his restraints. His hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the buckle undone. He fell more than climbed out of the seat, landing hard on what used to be the side wall of his ship. Everything was sideways. Sparks fell like rain from exposed wiring above him. The emergency hatch took all his strength to force open. Fresh air hit his face, sweet and cool. Jake dragged himself out of the wreckage and collapsed on the ground, gasping. Every part of his body ached, but nothing felt broken. Minor miracle number 2. He lay there for maybe 30 seconds before reality set in. The sun was already sinking toward the horizon. He had maybe 2 hours of daylight left. On Draken Prime, darkness meant death. This moon belonged to creatures that made Earth's ancient dinosaurs look like house pets. Dragons. Real actual dragons. The Galactic Survey had spotted them from orbit 5 years ago. Massive reptilian creatures that hunted in coordinated packs. They had scales that glowed in the dark, creating patterns that scientists thought might be some form of communication. Every expedition that had tried to study them up close had ended badly. Hence the red flag warning. Jake forced himself to his feet. His ship was totaled. The hull had split open in 3 places. The engine section was completely gone, probably scattered across half a mile of forest. His emergency beacon blinked weakly on his wrist display, but the signal was damaged. It might take days for a rescue team to find him. Days he probably didn't have. He needed supplies. Water, food, maybe some kind of shelter. Jake climbed back into the wreckage, moving carefully around the sharp edges and sparking wires. His emergency kit was still strapped under the pilot's seat. He grabbed it along with a coil of synthetic rope in his field jacket. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. High-pitched and desperate. Almost like crying. Jake froze. Every instinct screamed at him to ignore it, to get whatever he could and find shelter before dark. But the sound came again and something in it made his chest tighten. He followed the noise to the back section of the ship where the cargo hold had been. A piece of hull plating had crushed part of the structure, creating a small cave of twisted metal. The crying was coming from inside. Jake knelt down, peering into the shadows. At first he couldn't see anything. Then something moved. Small shapes, huddled together in the darkness. His blood went cold. 3 dragon hatchlings stared back at him with huge golden eyes. They were tiny, maybe the size of cats, with soft-looking scales that shimmered even in the dim light. One of them was trapped under a piece of metal, its small leg bent at an angle that made Jake wince. The other 2 pressed against it, making those heartbreaking crying sounds. "Oh no," Jake whispered. "No, no, no." He looked around frantically, as if expecting adult dragons to come charging out of the forest at any moment. How had hatchlings gotten into his ship? He must have crashed near a nest. The impact had trapped them in the wreckage. The smart thing to do was walk away. Leave them. They were dragons. In a few months they would be big enough to swallow him whole. Their parents were somewhere out there, probably the most dangerous creatures on this entire moon. Jake looked at the trapped hatchling. It stared back at him, golden eyes filled with pain and fear. It made a soft chirping sound, almost like a question. He cursed under his breath. His sister Kelly back on Earth always said he had too much heart for his own good. She was probably right. Jake grabbed the support beam that was pinning the metal down. He braced his feet and pulled with everything he had. The beam shifted slightly. The trapped hatchling cried louder. Jake adjusted his grip and pulled again, muscles burning with effort. The metal lifted. The hatchling scrambled free, limping on its injured leg but mobile. All three of them immediately rushed toward Jake, climbing over each other in their panic and relief. Before he could react, they were on him. Tiny claws dug into his jacket as they climbed up his chest and shoulders. They pressed against his neck, his face, making small chirping and trilling sounds. Their scales were warm and surprisingly soft. "Hey, easy," Jake said, trying to gently remove them. "You're okay now. Go on, get out of here. Find your family." He set them on the ground. They just looked up at him and chirped louder. Jake took a step back. They followed. He took another step. They followed again, stumbling over rocks and roots to stay close to him. "No. No way. You can't stay with me." Jake pointed toward the forest. "Your mom is out there somewhere. Go find her." The smallest hatchling sat down at his feet and looked up at him with those impossibly large eyes. It tilted its head to one side, confused why this strange creature was trying to send it away. Jake felt his resolve crumbling. They had imprinted on him. He'd saved them, and now they thought he was their parent or protector or whatever dragons called the adults in their lives. The sun dipped lower. The shadows grew longer. From somewhere in the forest, a sound rolled across the valley, deep and resonating. A roar that made the ground vibrate beneath Jake's feet. It was answered by another roar from a different direction. Then another. And another. The pack was out there. They were calling to each other as the hunt began. The three hatchlings heard the calls and responded, their small voices high and urgent. They pressed against Jake's legs, trembling. He looked down at them. Looked at the darkening forest. Looked at his useless ship and his damaged beacon. "This is the worst decision I've ever made," Jake muttered. But even as he said it, he was scooping up the hatchlings and tucking them inside his jacket. "Come on. We need to find shelter. Now." The hatchlings settled against his chest, their small bodies warm and trusting. Jake grabbed his emergency kit and started moving, searching for anywhere they could hide for the night. Behind him, the sun touched the horizon. The forest began to glow with bioluminescent patterns as the dragons emerged to hunt. And somewhere out there, a pack of the most dangerous predators on Draken Prime had just realized their babies were missing. It was going to be a very long night. Jake found the cave just as the last light faded from the sky. It wasn't much, just a shallow indent in a rocky hillside, barely deep enough for him to sit upright. But it would have to do. The alternative was being caught in the open when the dragons started their hunt in earnest. He squeezed inside, pulling the three hatchlings with him. They chirped softly, their small claws scratching against the stone as they tried to find comfortable positions. The smallest one, the one with the injured leg, nestled right under his chin. Jake could feel its rapid heartbeat against his throat. Outside, the forest transformed. Bioluminescent patterns began flickering between the trees. Blue lights, then green, then purple. They moved with purpose, weaving through the darkness like ghostly dancers. Beautiful and absolutely terrifying. Those weren't fireflies or glowing plants. Those were the adult dragons, their scales lighting up as they communicated and hunted. Jake pulled out his emergency supplies and took inventory. 1 thermal blanket. 2 protein bars. A half-full water bottle. A small medical kit. A handheld light that was already running low on power. And a survival knife that would be about as useful as a toothpick against a full-grown dragon. Not exactly a survival kit built for this situation. The hatchlings watched him with curious eyes as he spread the thermal blanket over his lap. He pulled them close, trying to share body heat. The temperature was dropping fast. His breath came out in small clouds. One of the hatchlings, the one with darker scales, started making a sound Jake hadn't heard before. Not crying, but something else. Almost like it was trying to talk. The sound rose and fell in patterns. From the forest, an adult dragon answered. The call was deeper, stronger, but it had the same rhythm. The same pattern. All three hatchlings perked up. They responded together, their small voices harmonizing in a way that seemed impossible for creatures so young. They were calling for their family. "No, no, no," Jake whispered urgently, cupping his hands gently over their snouts. "You can't do that. Please don't do that." But they didn't understand. They just knew they were scared and wanted their mother. They called again, louder this time. The adult's response was closer. Much closer. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. He could see movement now between the trees. Large shapes moving with surprising grace for their size. Their glowing scales created patterns that seemed to convey meaning. One dragon would flash blue and green, another would answer with purple and red. It was like watching a conversation in light. They were organizing. Coordinating their search. The hatchlings squirmed in Jake's arms, trying to call out again. He held them closer, speaking in a low, soothing voice. I know you want your mom. But we have to be quiet right now. Just for a little while. Please. Maybe they heard something in his tone. Maybe they just got tired. Either way, they settled down, pressing against his chest and each other. Their small bodies radiated warmth that seeped through his jacket. Jake broke one of the protein bars into tiny pieces. The hatchlings sniffed the offering curiously. The smallest one licked a piece, made a face, then ate it anyway. The others followed. They made small satisfied sounds as they chewed like kids eating candy. You like that? Jake whispered. It's probably terrible compared to whatever you normally eat. Sorry about that. One of the hatchlings burped. A tiny little sound that would have been funny in any other situation. Jake felt the corner of his mouth twitch despite his fear. He gave them water from his canteen, pouring small amounts into his cupped palm. They lapped it up eagerly, their tongues surprisingly gentle. When they finished, they started grooming each other, licking their scales clean. It was such a normal domestic thing to see. Like watching puppies or kittens. Easy to forget they would grow into apex predators. A shadow passed directly in front of the cave entrance. Jake's breath caught in his throat. He could see the dragon clearly now. It was massive, easily 20 feet long from nose to tail. Its scales were deep blue with silver patterns that pulsed with light. Each step it took shook small pebbles loose from the cave ceiling. The dragon paused. Its head swiveled toward the cave. Jake could see its eyes now. Golden. Intelligent. Focused. The hatchlings went perfectly still. They sensed the danger, even if they didn't understand it was their own family out there. Jake's hand moved slowly toward his knife. Not that it would help. If that dragon wanted them, they were done. But holding the knife gave him something to focus on besides his terror. The dragon took a step toward the cave. Then another. Its snout was only feet away from the entrance now. Jake could smell it. A musky, reptilian scent mixed with something else. Something wild. He pressed himself against the back wall of the cave, as far from the entrance as he could get. The hatchlings trembled against him. One of them made a tiny whimper. The adult dragon's eyes locked onto the cave. Onto them. Jake saw the exact moment it registered something was inside. Its pupils dilated. Its scales flashed from blue to red. Warning colors. This was it. Jake tightened his grip on the knife and positioned himself in front of the hatchlings. If this thing came in, he would at least try to protect them. Pointless, maybe, but he couldn't just sit there and do nothing. The dragon opened its mouth. Jake saw rows of teeth, each one as long as his hand. It took a breath, and Jake knew what was coming. A roar. An attack. The end. Then, from somewhere to the east, another dragon called. The sound was urgent. Insistent. The dragon at the cave entrance turned its head. It called back, its scales flickering through a rapid sequence of colors. Some kind of response. The distant dragon called again. Whatever it was saying, it was important. The dragon in front of the cave took one last look at their hiding spot. Its eyes narrowed as if memorizing the location. Then it turned and loped away, moving toward the other call. Jake didn't move for a full minute. He just sat there, knife in hand, waiting for the dragon to come back. It didn't. Slowly, carefully, he let out his breath. His whole body was shaking. The hatchlings looked up at him with those big eyes, confused by his fear. That was close, Jake whispered. That was way too close. The night stretched on. Hours passed like days. The adult dragons continued their search, their calls echoing through the valley. Sometimes they came close to the cave. Sometimes Jake could see their shadows moving past. But they didn't stop again. The hatchlings grew restless around midnight. They were hungry and scared and didn't understand why they had to stay hidden. Jake did his best to keep them calm. He talked to them in a low, steady voice. Told them about Earth. About his sister Kelly who ran a bakery in Portland. About his apartment with the terrible heating and the neighbor who played music too loud. Nonsense really. But the hatchlings seemed to like the sound of his voice. They settled down, listening with tilted heads. You know what's funny? Jake said softly, stroking the smallest one's scales. I spent 5 years studying alien life. Traveled to 12 different systems. Published papers about interspecies communication. And here I am, probably going to die on some random moon because I couldn't leave 3 babies in a crashed ship. The smallest hatchling nuzzled his hand. Its scales were warm and smooth, like polished stones left in the sun. Yeah, Jake smiled. You're welcome. Around 2 in the morning, Jake's eyes started to close. He fought it. Fought hard. Falling asleep meant letting his guard down. Meant not hearing if something approached. But exhaustion is a patient hunter. It waits for every guard to drop, every defense to weaken. The hatchlings had already fallen asleep, curled together on his lap like a pile of scaly kittens. Their breathing was slow and rhythmic. One of them was snoring. Actually snoring. Tiny little sounds that shouldn't have been possible from a dragon. Jake's head nodded forward. He jerked it back up. His eyes burned. His whole body ached from tension and the crash and sitting on cold stone for hours. Just a few minutes, he thought. Just rest my eyes for a few minutes. The hatchlings shifted in their sleep, pressing closer to his warmth. Their heartbeats created a steady rhythm against his chest. Like a lullaby. Jake's eyes closed. Outside, the adult dragons continued their hunt through the forest, their calls growing more distant as they searched farther from the crash site. Inside the cave, a human and 3 dragon hatchlings slept, wrapped in a thermal blanket, trusting each other to survive until dawn. Jake woke to silence. The kind of silence that made his skin crawl. No bird calls. No wind through the trees. Nothing. Just dead, heavy silence that pressed down like a weight. His neck ached from sleeping at an awkward angle against the cave wall. The hatchlings were still asleep on his chest, their small bodies rising and falling with each breath. One of them was drooling on his shirt. Under any other circumstances, it would have been adorable. Sunlight streamed through the cave entrance. Morning had come. He had survived the night. Against all odds, he was still alive. Jake started to relax. Started to think maybe, just maybe, he could make it through this. Then he heard it. The sound that turned his relief into ice-cold fear. Breathing. Deep, heavy breathing. Right outside the cave. His eyes snapped to the entrance. The sunlight was blocked by a massive shadow. Something big was standing there. Something that made the dragon from last night look small. Jake froze. Every muscle in his body locked up. His hand instinctively moved to cover the hatchlings, even though he knew it was pointless. If that thing wanted them, there was nothing he could do. A head pushed into the cave entrance. Massive. Scarred. Ancient-looking. Its scales were deeper and richer in color than any of the dragons he had seen last night. Deep blues and purples that seemed to shift and shimmer even in the dim light. Battle scars crisscrossed its snout and neck. This was the Alpha. The leader of the pack. Golden eyes stared directly at Jake. Studying him. Measuring him. The intelligence in those eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't some mindless beast. This was a thinking, feeling creature making decisions. Jake couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. He just stared back, certain these were his last moments. The Alpha's nostrils flared. It sniffed loudly, its hot breath washing over Jake and the hatchlings. It examined every detail. The torn jacket. The emergency blanket. The small knife still clutched uselessly in Jake's hand. Then it looked at the hatchlings. Its eyes softened just slightly. Something changed in its expression. One of the hatchlings stirred. The smallest one, the one Jake had started thinking of as Pip. It yawned, showing tiny rows of teeth. Its eyes opened slowly, unfocused and sleepy. Then it saw the Alpha. Pip's entire body went rigid for half a second. Then it made a sound Jake had never heard before. A happy, excited chirp that was almost a squeal. The little hatchling scrambled off Jake's chest, nearly falling in its hurry, and stumbled toward the massive dragon. The Alpha lowered its head. Pip crashed into its snout, climbing and chirping frantically. The sound was pure joy. Pure relief. Like a child reuniting with a parent after being lost. The other 2 hatchlings woke up at the noise. They saw the Alpha and immediately joined their sibling, all 3 of them swarming around the massive dragon's head. They chirped and trilled, climbing over each other, their small tails wagging. The Alpha made a sound Jake had never heard a dragon make. Low and rumbling but gentle. Almost like a purr. It nuzzled each hatchling in turn, checking them for injuries. When it got to Pip, it spent extra time examining the injured leg. Jake remained pressed against the back wall of the cave. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. The Alpha hadn't attacked. Hadn't even threatened. It was focused entirely on the babies. Then those golden eyes turned back to Jake. The Alpha studied him for a long moment. Jake could see it thinking, processing. Making connections. The hatchlings had been with this human. They were unharmed. Well-fed even. Protected through the night while the pack hunted. The massive dragon moved closer. Its head pushed further into the cave. Jake had nowhere to go. He was trapped against solid rock. I didn't hurt them, Jake said quietly, his voice shaking. I kept them safe. That's all. I just kept them safe. The Alpha stopped inches from Jake's face. He could count every scale. See every scar. Smell the wild, primal scent of a predator that had never known fear. Then the alpha did something that made Jake's mind go blank with shock. It pressed its forehead gently against Jake's chest, right where the hatchlings had been sleeping. The contact was brief, maybe 2 seconds, but Jake felt the rumble that went through the dragon's body. A sound that vibrated through his bones. Recognition. Acknowledgement. The alpha pulled back. Its scales flickered through a sequence of colors. Blue, green, gold. The patterns seemed deliberate, intentional, like it was trying to communicate. Jake just stared, unable to process what had just happened. The alpha backed out of the cave. Jake heard movement outside. More dragons. The whole pack was out there. "Oh God," Jake whispered. This was it. The alpha had checked on its young and now the pack would finish him off for taking them. But that's not what happened. The alpha called out. A series of sounds mixed with flashing scale patterns. The other dragons responded, their voices joining in what sounded like a conversation. Jake forced himself to move. His legs felt like jelly, but he managed to stand. He stepped carefully toward the cave entrance, expecting at any moment to be attacked. 6 dragons stood in a semicircle outside the cave. 6. The entire pack. They were all massive, all battle-scarred, all watching him with those intelligent golden eyes. The hatchlings played at the alpha's feet, happy and oblivious to the tension. They chased each other's tails and pounced on rocks, making the same joyful sounds that puppies make. One of the smaller adult dragons, a female with silver-tinted scales, approached. Jake tensed, ready to dive back into the cave. But the dragon just stopped a few feet away and lowered her head. She was holding something in her mouth. She dropped it at Jake's feet. A fresh kill. Some kind of local prey animal about the size of a rabbit. Still warm. Jake looked at the offering. Looked at the dragon. Understanding dawned slowly. "You're thanking me," he said in disbelief. "You're actually thanking me." The silver dragon's scales flickered. Blue, green, blue, pause, green. She repeated the pattern twice as if making sure Jake saw it. Another dragon approached from the left. This one was leaner, younger maybe. It dropped more food. Then stepped back, its scales showing the same pattern. Blue, green, blue, pause, green. Jake's xenobiology training kicked in despite his shock. He pulled out his damaged recorder from his jacket pocket. It was scratched and cracked, but the light was still blinking. Still recording. "Personal log," Jake said quietly, his voice unsteady. "Day 1 after crash. I'm standing in front of 6 adult Draken Prime dragons. They're not attacking. They're bringing me offerings. I think they're accepting me into their pack structure. Temporarily at least." The alpha watched him talk into the device. Its head tilted slightly, curious but not threatened. Jake continued, "They're communicating through bioluminescent patterns in their scales. The pattern they keep showing me is blue, green, blue, pause, green. I think it means something like safe or friend or family. They're using it to identify me as part of their group." Pip scampered over and climbed up Jake's leg. The little hatchling settled on his shoulder, chirping happily. The adult dragons saw this and didn't react aggressively. If anything, they seemed satisfied. The alpha made another sound. The other dragons responded. Their scales flashed in complex sequences that Jake couldn't begin to interpret. But he could see the pattern. They were having a conversation. An actual conversation with structure and responses. "They're not animals," Jake whispered into his recorder. "They're people. Different from us, but people. Everything we thought about this species was wrong." One of the hatchlings brought Jake a small rock, dropping it at his feet and looking up expectantly. Jake realized it wanted him to throw it. To play. He picked up the rock and tossed it gently. The hatchling chased after it with pure excitement, the other 2 joining in. They tumbled over each other, fighting playfully for the prize. The adult dragons watched their young play with the human. And they didn't stop it. They let it happen. Jake sank down to sit on a boulder, his legs finally giving out. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him shaky and exhausted. But he was alive. More than alive. He was sitting among creatures that should have killed him, and instead they were accepting him. The alpha settled down nearby, its massive body creating a windbreak. The other dragons spread out, some keeping watch, others grooming or resting. It was a domestic scene. A family scene. And somehow, impossibly, Jake was part of it. The morning sun climbed higher, and Jake found himself in the strangest situation of his life. He sat on a flat rock surrounded by 6 massive dragons who could kill him with a single swipe of their claws, yet here they were, simply existing together. The hatchlings played nearby, pouncing on each other and tumbling through the grass like oversized kittens. Jake kept his recorder running, documenting everything. His hands had stopped shaking, though he wasn't sure if that was courage or shock. Probably shock. The silver-scaled female dragon approached again. She moved slowly, deliberately, keeping her body low in a way that seemed non-threatening. When she got close, she made a sound. A series of chirps and low rumbles. Then her scales lit up. Blue, green, blue, pause, green. The same pattern from before. Jake watched carefully. She was trying to communicate. Actually trying to teach him. He fumbled in his emergency kit and pulled out a glow stick. It was designed for signaling rescue teams, capable of cycling through different colors. Jake activated it and tried to copy the pattern. Blue, green, blue, pause, green. Every dragon stopped what they were doing. All 6 heads swung toward Jake. The hatchlings froze mid-play. For a heartbeat, Jake thought he had made a terrible mistake. Maybe he had just said something offensive in dragon language. Maybe he had challenged them or insulted them. Then the alpha made a sound. It was short and sharp, almost like a bark. But the way the other dragons reacted told Jake everything. They were surprised. Impressed even. The silver female stepped closer. She repeated her pattern, but slower this time. More deliberate. Like a teacher working with a student. Jake copied it again with his glow stick. This time he got the rhythm better, the pauses more precise. The female scales flashed rapidly. A different pattern. More complex. Red, blue, purple, green, pause, blue, blue. Jake tried to memorize it. He held up the glow stick and attempted the sequence. He messed up the ending, adding an extra blue by accident. The female made a sound that Jake could only describe as gentle correction. She showed the pattern again. Slower. Jake tried again. This time he got it right. The alpha rumbled approval. The sound resonated through the ground. The other dragons joined in, their scales flashing in what Jake was beginning to recognize as positive acknowledgement. "I'm talking to them," Jake said into his recorder, his voice filled with wonder. "I'm actually communicating with them. This is real language, not just animal calls. They have structure, grammar, maybe meaning. This changes everything we know about non-human intelligence." For the next hour, Jake engaged in the most important conversation of his life. The dragons would show him patterns. He would try to copy them with his crude glow stick. Sometimes they would correct him. Sometimes they would encourage him. It was slow and frustrating, limited by his simple tool compared to their sophisticated bioluminescence, but it was working. Jake learned that the blue-green pattern meant something like safe or family. The red-purple sequence seemed to indicate danger or warning. A quick flash of all colors meant attention or look here. It was basic, primitive communication, but it was real. Pip, the smallest hatchling, became fascinated with the glow stick. The little dragon kept trying to catch the light with its tiny claws, jumping and pouncing. Every time it missed, it would look confused, then try again. The adult dragons watched this with what Jake could only interpret as amusement. Their scales flickered in gentle patterns, and they made soft rumbling sounds. "They're laughing," Jake said to his recorder. "They have a sense of humor. They find their young ones' antics entertaining, just like human parents watching their kids." One of the younger adult dragons brought water. It approached the small stream nearby, lowered its head, and somehow carried water back in its mouth without spilling much. It deposited the water into a natural depression in a rock near Jake, creating a small pool he could drink from. Jake stared at the offering. This wasn't instinct. This was problem-solving. Tool use in a way. Understanding that humans needed water and finding a way to provide it. "Thank you," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. He made the blue-green pattern with his glow stick, hoping it conveyed gratitude. The young dragon's scales flashed the same pattern back. Then it touched Jake's hand gently with its snout. The gesture was unmistakable. Affection. Connection. Jake felt tears prick his eyes. He was forming bonds with creatures that every human authority had classified as dangerous animals. But they weren't animals. They were people. Just different kinds of people. The hatchlings grew hungry around midday. They made specific sounds and the adults responded immediately. 2 of the dragons left, presumably to hunt. The others stayed, keeping watch. The alpha remained closest to Jake, its massive presence both intimidating and strangely comforting. Jake shared more of his emergency rations with the hatchlings. They ate eagerly, making happy chirping sounds. Pip climbed into Jake's lap and settled there, content to just be close. The little dragon's injured leg seemed better today. Still limping slightly but able to bear weight. That's when Jake's emergency beacon chirped. The sound was loud in the quiet afternoon. Every dragon immediately went on alert. Scales flashed red. Warning colors. The adults formed a protective circle around the hatchlings and Jake. "Wait, no, it's okay," Jake said quickly, holding up his hands. He showed them the beacon on his wrist. It's just a signal. Help is coming. Other humans. The Alpha moved forward, sniffing the beacon suspiciously. Its eyes narrowed. Jake could see it processing, understanding that something was about to change. Jake's mind raced. A rescue ship would be coming. They would see him surrounded by dragons and assume the worst. They might come in with weapons ready. They might try to save him by attacking the pack. Oh no, Jake muttered. This could go very, very wrong. He looked at the Alpha. At the dragons who had accepted him. At the hatchlings playing at his feet. At the fragile understanding they had built over the past few hours. A ship full of scared, well-armed humans was about to arrive. Humans who had been taught these creatures were monsters. Humans who would see Jake surrounded and think he was in danger. Jake had maybe 2 hours to figure out how to prevent a disaster. 2 hours to bridge the gap between two species who had never successfully communicated before. 2 hours to make sure nobody died because of a misunderstanding. He looked down at his simple glow stick. At the basic patterns he had learned. At the trust he had somehow earned from these magnificent creatures. Okay, Jake said more to himself than anyone else. Time to see if this communication thing actually works under pressure. The Alpha watched him with those intelligent golden eyes. Waiting. Trusting. Expecting Jake to handle whatever was coming. Jake just hoped he was worthy of that trust. Because in 2 hours, everything would change. For better or worse, first contact between humans and the dragons of Draken Prime was about to become official. And Jake Mitchell, a xenobiologist who had crashed on the wrong moon at the wrong time, was somehow the ambassador for both sides. No pressure at all. The rescue ship appeared exactly 90 minutes later, descending through the clouds with engines roaring loud enough to shake the trees. Jake watched it approach with a knot of dread in his stomach. This could go so wrong in so many ways. The moment the ship's engines fired up for landing, every dragon went into combat mode. Their scales flashed bright red, pulsing with aggressive warning patterns. The adults formed a tight defensive formation with the hatchlings in the center and Jake right beside them. Low, threatening growls rumbled from 6 massive throats. The sound made Jake's teeth vibrate. The Alpha positioned itself directly between the landing ship and its pack. Its scales blazed like warning lights, shifting between red and orange. The message was crystal clear even without translation. Come closer and there will be blood. Jake stepped forward, placing himself in front of the Alpha. Every dragon eye locked onto him. The Alpha made a sharp sound, clearly telling him to get back to safety. Trust me, Jake said, looking up at the massive creature. He made the blue-green pattern with his glow stick. Say, family. Please trust me. His comm unit crackled to life. A woman's voice, sharp with urgency. Mitchell? Jake Mitchell, respond. We have visual on your location. We're seeing multiple large hostiles surrounding you. Stay calm. We're going to extract you. Jake grabbed his comm. Commander Hayes, listen very carefully. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage the dragons. They are not attacking me. They're protecting me. Silence on the other end. Then, say again? Did you hit your head in the crash, Mitchell? I'm completely serious, Lisa. These creatures saved my life. They've accepted me into their pack. If you come in with weapons hot, people are going to die. Probably starting with me. More silence. Jake could imagine the argument happening on that ship. The crew would think he had lost his mind. Standard protocol when encountering the dragons was overwhelming force and immediate extraction. The ship hovered 50 yards away, not landing. Jake could see weapons ports opening along its hull. His heart rate spiked. Lisa, please. Give me a chance to show you. Just one person. Unarmed. Send someone out unarmed and I'll prove they're not dangerous. Jake, that's insane. Those things are classified as extreme threat level. The classification is wrong. We were wrong about them. About everything. Jake's voice cracked with desperation. I spent the night with 3 of their babies. The pack hunted all night looking for them. When they found us this morning, they could have killed me. Instead, they thanked me. They've been teaching me their language. Lisa, they have language. Actual complex communication. They're intelligent. They're people. Another long pause. Jake watched the weapon ports. If they fired, the dragons would attack. The hatchlings would probably die in the crossfire. Everything Jake had survived the past day would be for nothing. Please, Jake said quietly. I'm begging you. Trust me on this. The weapon ports closed. The ship's landing gear extended. It touched down slowly, carefully. The ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. Commander Lisa Hayes appeared at the top of the ramp. She wore only her flight suit. No armor. No visible weapons. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and the kind of face that had seen too much to be easily shocked. But even she looked nervous as she descended the ramp. The dragons tracked her every movement. Their scales remained red. Warning. The alpha's muscles were coiled, ready to strike at the first sign of threat. Lisa walked slowly across the open ground. Her hands were raised, clearly visible and empty. To her credit, she didn't shake. Didn't show fear even though Jake knew she had to be terrified. "Jake," she said calmly. "I'm here." "Now what?" Jake held up his glow stick. "Watch." He created the blue-green pattern. "Say, family." Then he pointed at Lisa and repeated it. The alpha's eyes shifted between Jake and Lisa. It made a low questioning sound. "It's saying thank you," Jake explained. "They understand gratitude, reciprocity, social bonds." Tom looked like he might cry. "I've been studying xenobiology for 20 years. This shouldn't be possible with a non-spacefaring species. Maybe we've been looking at intelligence all wrong," Jake said. The breakthrough moment came when Lisa pulled out a portable holographic display to show the dragons images. She started with simple things. Colors, shapes. The dragons watched with intense focus. When she showed an image of water, the young dragon that had brought Jake water earlier made excited sounds and its scales flashed a pattern Jake hadn't seen before. Lisa quickly cycled through more images. Food, sky, trees. Each time, dragons would respond with specific scale patterns. "They have words," Lisa breathed. "Distinct words for distinct concepts. This is a complete language system." The alpha approached the holographic display. It studied the images for a long moment. Then it looked at Lisa. At Jake. Its scales began flashing in an incredibly complex sequence. Colors layered over colors, patterns within patterns. It went on for nearly 30 seconds. When it finished, the alpha looked at them expectantly. "It just said something important," Jake said. "Something complex. We need better translation tools. We need linguists, anthropologists. This is first contact, Lisa. Real first contact." Lisa nodded slowly. She pulled Jake aside while her crew continued carefully documenting the interactions. "You understand what this means? The paperwork. The bureaucracy. The complete restructuring of how we classify intelligent species. This moon will need protected status. The dragons will need representation in galactic councils if they qualify for sentient species protections." "They qualify," Jake said firmly. "They're not animals. They're people who happen to look like dragons. The politicians are going to lose their minds." "Good. Let them." As the sun began to set on Jake's second day on Draken Prime, it was time to leave. The rescue team had what they needed. Hundreds of hours of footage. Documented communication attempts. Proof of complex social structures and intelligence. The hardest part was saying goodbye to the hatchlings. All three had climbed on Jake, chirping sadly. They understood he was leaving even if they didn't understand why. "I'll come back," Jake promised them, stroking their small heads. "I swear I'll come back." Pip, the smallest one, looked up at him with those huge golden eyes. It made a soft, questioning chirp. "Yeah, I'll miss you too, little one." The alpha approached one final time. It looked at Jake with an expression that seemed almost human. Understanding. Respect. Maybe even friendship. Then it did what it had done that first morning. It pressed its forehead gently against Jake's chest. Right over his heart. A gesture of acknowledgement. A bond. Jake reached up and touched the alpha's scales. They were warm and smooth under his palm. "Thank you for trusting me." The alpha pulled back. Its scales flashed a new pattern Jake hadn't seen before. Complex and beautiful. Purple, blue, green, gold, all flowing together like a sunset. Jake didn't know what it meant. But it felt like a promise. "Until we meet again." As the rescue ship lifted off, Jake watched through the viewport. The dragons stood together, watching the ship rise. The hatchlings jumped and waved their small arms. Even from this height, Jake could see their scales flashing. Blow. Green. Blow. Pause. Green. Safe. Family. Friend. Lisa stood beside him. "What you did down there, Jake. That footage of you sleeping with those hatchlings on your chest while their pack hunted all night. It's already going viral across human space. You've become the face of a completely new understanding of alien intelligence." "I just couldn't leave 3 babies to die," Jake said quietly. "You did more than that. You built a bridge. Between us and them." 3 months later, Jake stood on the landing pad of the new research station. This time he wasn't crashing. He was arriving as the official human ambassador to the dragon population of Draken Prime. The moon's classification had been changed. Protected status. No mining. No colonization. Only respectful study and communication. As Jake walked into the forest, following the paths he now knew by heart, he heard it. A familiar roar. Deep and welcoming. The alpha emerged from the trees. Older now. New scars from the changing seasons. But those golden eyes were the same. Jake stood still. Waiting. The alpha's scales flashed. Blue-green, blue paws green. Safe. Family. Friend. Then 3 shapes burst from the undergrowth. The hatchlings, except they weren't hatchlings anymore. They'd grown to half the size of the adults, their scales bright and healthy. But they remembered. They swarmed Jake just like that first night, chirping and climbing on him. Pip nuzzled his face, making the same happy sounds as before. Jake laughed through tears. Hey guys. Told you I'd come back. The alpha rumbled approval. Its scales shifted through patterns of welcome and joy. Jake looked at these magnificent creatures. At the family that had accepted a strange human who'd crashed into their lives. Let's get to work, he said. We've got a lot to learn from each other. And deep in the Galactic Survey Corps headquarters, Jake's report was changing everything. How humanity viewed intelligence. Communication. What it meant to be a person. All because one man couldn't walk away from 3 babies in danger. All because sometimes the scariest monsters turn out to be friends.